Hi everyone, Amandine here and welcome for another live video AMA. During the stream we had some trouble with the sound and especially with my mic, so right now you can't hear me and that's why I'm recording a really short version of my introduction to put on the top of the video. Basically, I'm just inviting everyone to join us in the chat, ask their own question or say hi, tell us a bit more about what they're working on. And then I introduce our guest for the day, Penny Schiffer, who is the founder of Raized.AI. I let Penny introduce herself and then I'll kickstart firing up with my question. Thanks, everyone.
Sure. Hi, Amandine. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's also the first thing I'm doing after the summer break, so that's really very good. Thank you. I don't want to talk too much about who I am and how I grew up and all of these things, but maybe I can share a story about how I came here to what I'm doing right now. So about 2 years ago, I was on the plane flying to San Francisco. I was invited to share a bit about how the startup ecosystem is doing in Switzerland. I was invited for a Stanford talk. Sitting on the plane to San Francisco, talking to a guy who was doing his AI fintech startup. And during that flight, it really came to me that for my industry, I was working as a venture capitalist at the time, there was hardly any useful use of data. So I really thought, okay, this has to change because all industries can benefit from making things more efficient and using artificial intelligence. So that's when I started out to do what we do right now. So I'm the co-founder of Raized. So we are building a platform. We call it Venture Intelligence for venture capitalists, for business angels, and innovators in companies. And what we do is we help find startups, we help evaluate them using a very large data set so that we can predict which ones can be much more successful. And we help during the portfolio or investment time of the companies, for example, by finding the investors for the next round. So we are an early stage startup. We are doing our seed round right now. We have an MVP for which we have already first paying clients, but there is still a long way to go. It's a lot of fun. It's very intense, and I'd love to share and answer questions and whatever could be helpful for anyone else.
I love that. And the fact that you're still at an MVP stage, that was actually one of my questions because I've been through your website and I was wondering how can you have already a working platform and 3 products already. Like that's a lot. Building myself an AI startup, I completely understand the time it takes to build the core technology and the fact that you managed to have already clients and to have already an MVP out is super impressive, especially because I can see it now from my perspective as a founder how long it takes really to go from there and to have a product out of a tech piece. So yes, very impressive.
I can maybe tell you something about it because it was really a conscious decision, more or less during the time when COVID hit, about can we do any early monetization and any early proof of the market, or do we have to build the whole platform and everything we dream of before we can actually prove it? And one of my advisors, he really said, look, try to carve out something that can already give value to clients and don't build it in software that is set in stone, but try to capture the value that is there for clients. And what we did here is we focused on one geography. For now, we have a data pipeline that discovers the startups in Switzerland and now Germany. And we expose it in a way that doesn't require that you have to do everything in software, which is we send it out to clients as like, these are the new startups that we discovered in the last 2 weeks. And this doesn't require that you build a front end that is fully fledged, but you have to have your backend processes in place, and there is some manual rearrangement and putting the data into a nice format, but it can be done without having to build everything. And that's what we did, and focus all the attention onto talking to people who might want to use it.
That definitely makes sense, yes. I really have a kind of a burning question, and I know it may be a hard question to start with, but that's the first thing that came to mind when I was checking your website and diving more into what you do. So basically, your solution helps investors with sourcing, screening, and making decisions based on data, right? So,
Mhm.
for both VCs and angels, when you invest very early, one of the major criteria that people have been talking to have when they really talk to early stage founders is kind of rather intangible, and it's a lot based on the team, how strong the team is, and things that are very hard to quantify sometimes, especially at very early stage. It's quite often less about the idea and the market and more about the people. So how does your solution help with that? And is this just a way to be stronger on the numbers and on the data and make better decision for the non-biased aspects in complementarity to your gut feelings? Or how do you address that?
Mhm. So we have for the evaluation criteria, we take some of the things that normally VCs use when they do an evaluation, just like you said. For example, a VC would look at the diversity of a team. And with diversity, it's not only gender, but it can also be educational diversity. It may be even the age of the people. Is there a team, or is it just a single founder? So there are several aspects. And these aspects we took into consideration and made them be part of our prediction algorithm. And as you can imagine, it's no surprise, but diversity does have a positive impact, or is associated with startups being more successful. Because anyone can see, when you have a discussion with five people who are exactly the same, there is not much, let's say, conflict or not much tension, but also you don't come necessarily to the best decision. So generally, a diverse team definitely helps, and we have put this into a format so that a machine can read it. However, it can also mean sometimes that a bias can be reproduced. I mean, if you think of, let's say, university education, for example, there is clearly we can see that a good education is associated with being potentially more successful. And this should not lead you to only look for those founders, but if there is a combination of the other features that suggest that a startup has really a good foundation, it can even overrun the importance of a feature that is associated with the education. But we are aware of these kind of biases that can be self-reproducing, and we have to, validate and work against it to a certain extent in the further development of the product.
Mm. And also, you mentioned that you are right now focusing on the Swiss and German market, but in
Mhm.
terms of sectors, I guess you are sector agnostic, since many of your target audience are
Sure.
sector agnostic. How do you do to cover that much ground, and also to have up to date data? Because I guess the timing is key for a lot of investors, especially early stage VCs. So you have to have access to the latest data and things that
Mhm.
are really timely. So how do you cover that much ground, and how do you face the time?
Sure. So from the evaluation model that we built, we use a global data set. So we have labeled tens of thousands of startups that come from all geographies and from all sectors. And it's more or less kind of representative. So that's for the evaluation model. And for the discovery pipeline, it's a combination of going into databases and also researching and monitoring websites and other sources where startups come to the world. So when you announce yourself to the public, you leave traces, which is good, and we find those traces. And here it's a combination of a general way how to find those traces and a geography specific way to identify the best sources. So once we've done this in Switzerland, we know how to find and evaluate those sources, how to integrate them into our pipeline, and how to look for new ones. And that's what we are doing now for Germany and for other countries.
Okay, and also you um, you are targeting VCs, and it's interesting because from the startup point of view and startup founders point of view, VCs are like people who are extremely difficult to catch, people who are really difficult to approach. And it's interesting because I have been approaching VCs as not as a founder in the past, and I found the relationship being very different, and I found them actually quite approachable when you're not pitching. I'm wondering from your perspective, not as a founder pitching for investment, not as someone completely neutral either, just as a potential provider, service provider. How does this relationship work, and do you find VCs easy to approach? Do you have to really fight or to rely a lot on your existing network maybe to get access to these VCs? How does this work?
Well, it's a bit of both. I mean, I'm really grateful that I can rely on my network that I could build through being active in an investment role, and also of my understanding of the industry. And when I talk to people, I can really relate to them as a peer, which it makes it much more easier, I guess, than if you would purely come from the technology or data point of view. However, of course, you cannot just send a mail to someone and hope that they would reply out of the blue. So we are now really using our network, and we do have some very nice inflow because the topic seems to be on people's minds. So that's really, really good. And most of the conversations we have are very meaningful for both sides. And that's, I think, the timing here of introducing such a solution is the right timing. So sometimes this has also a very strong effect, right? But to scale beyond, the personal network into the thousands of investors there are in the world, we will have to rely on different ways of addressing them. So, like every startup, you start with your immediate network with the warm leads, and then you go beyond. So there, I have no dilution about it. No solution is going to go viral because it's so great, right?
Definitely, yes. Also, um, I know that there are many VC funds that have built their own tools, including some of them who are using AI to spot new startups. So I guess that's kind of your competitors. So it's interesting because your clients can sometimes also become kind of your competitors, but they tend to keep it just for them, so it doesn't necessarily make sense to invest that much money for one fund that will have limited investment reach. How do you see this trend growing? Do you see more and more VCs trying to internalize those skills and these technologies, or do you think that it's actually not part of your target market? Because I'm biased. I'm in the UK and we have lots of investors, and maybe investors that may be a bit more proactive and maybe tend to internalize more than in other countries.
Yes. So it's a very good question, and it's a question we also are asking ourselves. So I can see for the top tier VCs that act on a global basis, many of them have started to build their own pipelines, and it makes sense for them to do it. But they also discover it's pretty expensive to maintain them and to keep them up to date. So they are probably evaluating what they need to keep proprietary and where it makes sense to just use it themselves, and where they could actually also buy someone else's data or combine their efforts with someone else. For the next tier, which is still European or bigger funds that have between a couple 100 million to a billion, it is still not the case that all of them have really started significant efforts into building prediction models or something. Some of them are working rule based, so they have some, let's say, simple ideas in place of what startups they look at, and they can do some rule based inbound screening. But it's a lot of them are dreaming or hoping to build something and haven't done it yet. So this is a bit of a lot of talk and not too much work, unless you have the specific funds that really do something here, and you have the names out there. So there is a few, but it's not a common thing at all.
Okay. And also, you mentioned earlier that you're covering Switzerland, Germany, and I think you told me that you're also looking at France at some point. Um,
Yes.
how do you see this European VC scene? I feel that over the past few years, I saw the VC scene being a bit more European, and I've seen more and more investors care slightly less about Paris and investing in Europe as a whole. Do you see the same, or do you still see lots of differences and big barriers between the different countries? For example, from Switzerland to investors in Germany, do you see lots of big differences in the way they are evaluating startups, also sourcing, or just the way they react to the startup scene?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there is these two tiers of funds. There is the purely or truly global funds. There is the truly European funds that also sometimes invest outside of Europe, but they cover a lot of countries in Europe. And then there is the more regional funds that maybe do one country, do a region like Benelux, because they know the region best, they have their network. Maybe the size of the fund doesn't really justify that they would do a bigger sourcing, because it's a lot of effort to build a European deal flow pipeline. So it makes sense also that they kind of qualify or specify into a specific region. But for sure, many funds are looking into expanding their reach, also because there is still a lot of money in the market. So it's not like COVID-19 has stopped all investment activities. The money is still there. It needs to find investment targets. The conditions for founders may not be as good as they were in January, so there is definitely changes. But let's say in the midterm, these investments are going to be made, and there is even money competing for the best cases in quite a solid way.
Actually, so many VCs being a bit overwhelmed by the quantity of the deal flow they had to look after since the confinement and since COVID-19. I also feel that lots of startups feel a lot of pressure to be fundraising right now, so that may be the explanation. But have you seen lots of effect on your clients, or does it has changed a bit the demand? Maybe they're now a bit more pressed to have access to your tool ASAP.
Well, I see that the almost stopping of physical conferences, even for the second half of the year. It did not come back as some people were hoping in May. This led quite a few VCs to not seeing that deal flow that they used to see before. So for them, it's really it's a bit of a change. They are monitoring it. Not everybody sees effects already in numbers, but as we have seen more online things happening, this also leads to a need to actually go out to out active sourcing based on, for example, our list, or do a much more structured, let's say, evaluation of sources like VCs do for themselves. Sure, this definitely has an effect.
And also going back to what you mentioned before about building your MVP and going to market early, what has been the main big steps of the company over the past few months and the coming challenges for you? What's your plan for the future, for the coming months? I guess because you're right now you have an MVP, you're going to test it and to have more and more pilots and integrate the feedback. But what are the big next step coming for you in the coming months in terms of product or roadmap or whatever?
Mhm. So after we have now proven partially the market, and we have built the technical side of it, the next step is going to make the plan more solid about how we want to scale it now in detail, like which geographies do we want to address, how do we want to go from this sourcing into the evaluation and into the decision support area, which is the more complex one, and we have started to build this prediction model, but this has to be integrated. How we want to do the pricing more in detail. So definitely this is an ongoing target, as you can imagine. And we have an 18-month roadmap for after we close this MVP phase. Let's say it's like you do a pre-alpha. Now we are in alpha stage, then we will go to beta. So I have no delusion that we are not in beta yet. And then we will make it generally available. And the challenge is going to be to always put the right resources or the right amount of resources into what we need at this stage, because you could build any solution into a perfect solution right now, or you could do any data pipeline into 100%. You could try to do that, but it wouldn't be justified at this point in time to built everything already to be that solid.
Mm.
And to balance this is really a challenge in the team because everyone wants to do their best, which is not what we can afford right now because of speed and because of the resources we have. But over the month of COVID-19, we really found a way um, to set the priorities in a quite a good way because time and resources are restrained. We became
Yeah.
more aware of it during that lockdown period.
In terms of the team, you started touching a bit on that. So can you tell us a bit more about the composition of the team, how big it is? Have you been fundraising before? Have you raised money already, or are you still bootstrapping? What's the current stage of the company and size?
So we are living on bootstrapping and the grants right now.
Okay.
And the team is 4 people. So I have a strong data engineer, which is a very, let's say, it's the non-brainer that you need to build the pipeline. She's also female, so I'm happy actually to have a strong female on board, which yeah I always wanted, but it's not easy in a technical role to find someone that is a match. And then I have a head of product who is very, let's say, very witty in finding ways how to leverage the tools, how to put things together, how to be smart in how we put our effort. And then I have a UX part-time support. And during the time when we developed the front end, I was working with a software development agency in Russia and in Portugal. So they are still part of the team, but as we are now going out to the market, we are this comes in waves. So we will do that again more in the second half of the year.
The composition of the team when you at an early stage, and especially when you're bootstrapping, is super key. And I know many founders who actually ask about that. How do you attract talent when you're still a baby startup? When you try to get your first team members engaged and involved. What was your secret for that to really gather such a nice and strong team? And as you said, it's not easy, especially when you're a non-technical founder, to find the right technical partners and match for your company. So how did you go to find these amazing people?
Hmm. That's a very good question. I think I try to yeah bring my passion for the topic uh, in for the other people. So I try to find people who can share the vision, who really want to disrupt an industry and who feel like it's exciting to do something that is also hard. So it's this kind of feeling. And then I try to find a good balance for everybody between having a responsibility for something and the freedom to decide on how they want to do it. So it's hard actually at the moment to integrate people who are very junior, like interns, because of this whole remote work situation, which I didn't see before. Before it would be much easier, and I had an intern before, but now when you are all working remote, everybody has to be able to know what they are doing, and they have to structure themselves. I cannot, let's say, I don't want to say handhold because that's not what you do with an intern, but I cannot give them insights. I cannot give back and
Yeah.
have you learn while you are in the team as you could before. So that's
Mm.
unfortunately something I have no answer to, and I would love that to come back to the stage we had a year ago.
Mm.
But apart from that, yeah, it's a bit of luck, and it's a bit like dating actually. So last summer I also dated a bit for more technical co-founders to join the team, but yeah, it has to be a perfect match if you want
Yeah.
to marry someone as a co-founder, and it's a lot of effort.
I've been on quite a few podcasts recently, and every time I was asked about how I found my co-founder, and I think I'm quite lucky because I've known my co-founder for years now. We've used to work together in the past, and so I always knew I wanted to start a business with him. So I guess it was easier, but I know so many founders who've been struggling, and especially when you have an idea and you're just looking for someone to come on board and join you on this idea, it's really hard to find the right match. Because if you go to this kind of events, matchmaking events, the problem is if they want to be founders, they may already have some ideas.
Mhm.
So convincing someone to join you on your own idea, even if it's to bring their own thoughts to it, it's quite difficult. What about the fact that you're based in also in Switzerland? Does it really help with the hiring process? Do you have a strong startup scene there where you can hire startup people? Because that's also a mindset. The startup mindset is also something you want to get in your team, and people need to get it right.
Sure. I can definitely say in the last 5 to 10 years, there has been a lot going on, and the startup scene has developed a lot in Switzerland. So there is now, we have all these support programs, accelerators, we have the VCs, we have the office spaces, we have a bit of a startup scene, at least in Zurich and Lausanne, where we have the strong technical universities that are highly spitting out startup ideas and startup founders. Um, However, there are some aspects of that are Switzerland specific that are not necessarily making it the best place to start a business or to start a global business. And one of them being that generally salary costs are really high. This has many reasons, one of them being the exchange rate, but it might lead to you having a team that is 2 times more expensive than if it would sit in Germany. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's 2 times better equipped. It may be very similar. So that's one thing. If you have a business that requires a lot of people, like call center like activities or support activities, it's very unlikely that you will have all of your team sitting in Switzerland because of the salary cost. And with the salary cost and with the good opportunities you have in the traditional business world, it also means that it's not necessarily a natural step for people to step out of their well paid and comfortable corporate jobs. So I think when you have a country, some of the Southern European countries, they have less opportunities for those people, then it's natural to try something new, to take a risk. But if you have already everything you need, risk taking means that it's not likely that you will be better off. So that's a bit of the drawback that you can see from Switzerland being a place to start a business. But here you have a really a great history of amazing IP heavy startups that were founded through those through the universities and the whole ecosystem around it. So I think it's a great place actually, because the support system is strong. And with the languages, sometimes Switzerland has three national languages and is also strong in English. It sometimes means that it's easier to set up your business to serve other countries right from the start, because you built in the language capabilities in many cases.
I think that's one of the big factor that makes also London one of the important pillar of the startup scene in Europe. I'm French, and lots of people ask me about the French ecosystem for startups. And even if I left Paris many years ago, back then and still right now, I still feel that it's too French. It's very hard to be international in your DNA of your company from day one, because you're based in such a country that is focusing on their own language and focusing on its own markets first. While
Yeah.
when you're in an international environment, and when you're in this international space from day one, when you get started, that changes everything. And despite everything you said, you still started the company in Switzerland, so that means that there is some potential and some factors that attract you there. Also, it's a fantastic place. I used to work a lot with Switzerland, and every time I had the chance to go there, I loved it. I was taking any chance to have a meeting there.
Mhm. Yes, it's a lovely place, and it's important to also have a good, let's say, social or private environment, so that you can have a stability and a joy there. Because doing a business, building a business is hard. So if you had to fight with other things, or if your life would be like really stressful outside of that, I think that would be a double pressure. So I appreciate that being not the case, at least in my, let's say, situation here in Switzerland.
Talking more about you and your personal experience, you mentioned you used to work in venture capital before and investment, which is also not a place that is super diverse. So, how did you find this? Fantastic person in your team looking after the data. You say you're lucky because that's a fantastic woman to work with. Did you find her through maybe networking groups for women in tech? Are you active in this kind of groups? I know that you're doing also lots of mentoring, so are you also focusing on maybe diverse founders for the mentoring that you're doing?
Well, I'm afraid not really. I mean, I do support these ideas, and when I have the chance to contribute to such groups, I am very happy to do so. But I'm afraid outside of the my private life, having a family and my work, there is not much space to get additionally involved. Unfortunately, but that's the case. We are at the moment doing a bit of analysis based on the data that we have about how gender diverse the startup ecosystems in the different European countries actually are. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how about mixed teams in Switzerland, Germany, France, the UK? How about the VC scene also? Because this is not necessarily a place full of female leaders. So I would love to see how that compares. Unfortunately, I don't have the data yet, but happy to share them some later point in time. And I think actually for female founders, it's very important, and I don't have an easy answer on what it means that you have most likely not a female counterpart in the VC firm to talk to, because there are some transparent and clear business aspects how you evaluate a company, for sure. That's the main thing. But then there is also a bit of a social aspect, a bit of gut feeling, a bit of
Mm-hmm.
trust.
Yeah.
You kind of built a relationship for many years, so both parties have to feel comfortable. And I know that some VCs also do a bit of evaluation that goes more towards, is this a potential business friend, or, can I have a drink with them? Like, do I feel when it's hard that we will can still relate? And if some of that evaluation takes place, let's say, while you go on a party and have drinks all night, I'm not sure that I should be doing that with a male VC or any, it's just it might lead to an awkward situation. I know
Mm-hmm.
that this is not the main thing how you evaluate a company, but it may be, it may come naturally as part of the such evaluation processes in some cases, and this is difficult for a woman to take part in if this is like
Yeah.
you know a not a diverse environment. But I'm afraid I have no real answer to it, what it means or how this could be solved, but I think it makes it a little special for women when they fundraise.
I completely agree, and that's a very difficult situation. And I think the opposite is also true. I have seen some women founders pitching to male investors about some product targeting women, and immediately they forwarded the case to a woman VC.
Mhm.
And they were like, well, no, we're talking to this VC because there are many reasons for that. And it's not because I'm a woman that I want absolutely to talk to a woman. So I completely agree. It's terrible that in both case, in all situations, the lack of diversity in VC has a really big effect on the lack of diversity in the portfolio. And it's not just about gender diversity, it's also about ethnic diversity and every kind of diversity. In the UK, we have an organization called Diversity VC, who has been doing lots of reports. And one of the reports that really got stuck into my mind said that for every £1 of venture capital investment invested in the UK, you have 89p that goes to an all male founder team,
Mhm.
and only less than 1p that goes to a woman founder. And if you're looking at, I don't know, black women or women with a ethnic minorities background, it's even worse. They're not here, and that's a shame. And when you see all those stories. You think, oh, that's a one-off story of one person who have been unlucky, but actually, when you see all the stories together of women who have been struggling fundraising just because they were women, or women who couldn't get answers to their email, you realize that it's not a one-off story. It happens so often that there is something broken here. Have you personally, Penny, been through a situation where being a woman you've been treated differently in this space, or have you faced a situation where you were like, shit, that's because is that because I'm a woman? I think in Europe it's more of the question. It's not that big discrimination necessarily, but like
Yeah,
soft things that happen, and you just left wondering, is that the reason?
yeah. It's hard to say. So I wouldn't really be able to pinpoint to a situation. And probably, even if it was the case, the other person wouldn't have done it on purpose. So it's
Yeah.
even hard to say here. But I wanted to also mention a great initiative that was started in the DACH region, so Germany, Austria, Switzerland. More than 40 investors got together and invited women founders, or women, let's say, diverse teams for a female founder office day. And it was just 2 weeks ago. I think it's a great initiative. They had a lot of people who subscribed, and they were doing, I think, a couple hundred matches. I'm not even sure. And I think this is a very great way to yeah, start a discussion, to also give visibility to the female VCs, because they also try to have more
Yes.
females on the other side. And this is not the last time they will do it. It had a great resonance, and I saw also in the UK these things are happening. So yeah, I think that's it's a good idea actually, and we should explore what it means and what it can lead to. So this is definitely not the solution to all the problems in the world, but I think it's a nice angle, and I like that this is happening. So that's it's good to hear, and it's a good time here.
It's good to start somewhere. I guess that's it. It's not going to be the one solution that's going to solve
Mhm,
everything, but at least it's one foot into the right direction, and
mhm.
hopefully we'll see over time more diverse portfolios. That's the thing. It takes time. Building an investment portfolio is over years. So it's not because we're pinpointing the problem right now and even looking at real hard data that is going to change overnight. So it also takes time to make this new investment. Now, briefly talking about your own experience, has there been any communities or resources or anything that has helped you so far as a founder, and especially as an early stage founder? Anything like from books, podcasts to communities, offline, online, anything that has been a great support to your journey?
Sure. So, one of the main aspects is really that I could tap into my network of other VCs and people I know in the space. So, I did a lot of customer interviews, and some of those interviews would also be a bit of sessions that helped me to understand how I should be going, or what is important to know. And then there is three more things that I find very important. So when we were still in the office, I would join a co-working space where there would be other startups that would be 1-2 years ahead of us, and it would be so important to talk to those other founders about practical things, like how do you do a work contract, how do you do the ESOP, like a share plan for the employees, all these things, but also on motivational things, like how do you deal with rejection of your proposals, those kind of things. So that definitely helped. Then the second resource came really as a surprise, and it was a coincidence. I met a guy who has been leading an AI analytics group in a big bank. He had 50 people under him for many years, and he would be the perfect person to balance between business and what AI can do, how you implement stuff. And he coaches us, like mentors us in this more general view. So we have to do all the things and the detailed stuff, and he helps us on the, let's say, data strategy side. That's very important. And then in Switzerland we have a program which is called InnoSwiss Startup Coaching. So you have a coach who is a very experienced, accredited person, someone from the field, and the coaching is a way that is very lightweight, so you can structure it in a way that works for you. It's not as much as an acceleration program where you
Mm.
commit to on-site stuff for months, but it's really for what you need, and it's a guided program that goes in stages. And I like these kind of things because they help you when you need it, but they don't burden you with education or other things that, it's not a one size fits all approach, and you can really select the coach and find someone who has the right balance between you know going after what you want, but also pushing you when they think you should be harder on something, or there is tough
Yeah.
decisions to. So that's really the resources that we use.
I feel that this kind of mentoring really helps with kind of serendipity where you're just discussing and suddenly you think of a question. So you're not just talking about the challenges you're facing today and like the pressing questions, but you're also having a real discussion with a human. And it's not just question answers, but it's also asking about how they did this, how they did that, how they approached that, what was their mindset, and you think about more things. I was recently a mentor, part of a program with young entrepreneurs, and I found this format really lightweight because we were discussing things that she's been working on through the program, but also random things, and I found it's more flexible than
Mhm.
sometimes trying to fit your own roadmap and workflow to an accelerator or to a program that doesn't really fit you because it's not your industry, it's not your type of company you're building, and you're still trying to make it right, but it doesn't make sense for you to do it now.
Yeah, I mean, accelerators can be amazing. Don't get me wrong, but it may not all accelerators are good at every point in time for every startup. So I that's a bit to keep in mind. And also, the Swiss ecosystem is kind of not that mature. So you also find some programs where you have a lot of people who want to get involved, who would love to move into the startup scene, who have done something else before, and some of them have a lot of practical experience in other fields, but they may not always be the best advisors for an early stage startup
Mm.
because they haven't gone through the cycle of finding a match between what you think is the business and what is actually the business. So some of them come off from corporate world and they would have approached things differently.
That completely makes sense. Yeah, I think it's a problem you may have everywhere between going completely through your own niche or trying to find contacts and support outside. And yeah, and I completely agree with what you said about accelerators. I feel that if you don't need to be accelerated right now, it sometimes it may be a waste of time, or also a waste of equity. I've seen so many programs taking a big chunk of your equity. So if you start diluting your equity early for programs that you don't need right now,
Mhm.
then the day you need it, you may have already wasted too much equity for the day you're fundraising. So I find that it's not necessarily good to do too many programs. Also, to be more selective is always better.
Would you say that there is a bit of inflation of acceleration programs? I mean, now that I'm on the other side, I see so many programs advertised. I'm not sure if this is because I didn't see them before or because there is just so many popping up that they are almost desperate to find startups to apply.
Yeah, I think they are definitely more and more, and I don't really know if it's because there is a real need for more programs. Um, I think sometimes when they're differentiating themselves really well, sometimes it makes sense. But the traditional approach of taking a bunch of equity just to help a startup, I mean, quite often I found that it's not a good opportunity for the founders. So Yeah, there are many programs that are free, and especially when you're very early, I think it's a waste of time. I think it's very good to join some of them when you know exactly what to expect and you
Mhm.
need something from them. And so you're going into this relationship having all the information about why you go there, why you choose them. And if you're just, going through a program just because everyone else does it, and it could be fun and it's good to not do things alone, that is not enough. That is not a good
Mhm.
reason to do that. So I've seen many people doing programs and they're just clearly lost and they're just doing a program because they don't really know what to do otherwise, or they need to have someone to kind of push them to do things. And I think it's not healthy to have this kind of relationship with the program. Even if some programs may be good and may have good people, it's not good for the founders to do that just because they're a bit lost momentarily. And I've seen some startups where they start fundraising, but they already have lost a big part of the company through different programs, and it just breaks my heart when I see that, because you're starting with like you're shooting yourself in the feet when you're starting this way, right? So you start a negotiation or just approaching VCs, but you already haven't the entire company to negotiate with. And so if you start diluting a lot at a pre-seed stage, what's going to happen when you reach Series B? I mean, not much will be left for you.
Yeah,
So
true.
that's the kind of thing that I try um, to be worried about, and to also mention to some founders who want to do a program and then another one and then another one, and you're like, well, maybe you need to have your own plan and stop following too many programs if you don't need to give a big push right now.
Good point.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but that's my take on it. Have you done any accelerator as per se?
Well, when I was still in my corporate job, I did an accelerator as an entrepreneurship project. So
Mm.
it's one of the accelerators that has mostly external startups, but then also they would have from some of the sponsors internal entrepreneurs join, which I thought was a good way to experience all this. And luckily, it did not involve equity here.
Okay,
So
good. There are so
yeah.
many different options. I think it's equity isn't necessarily the only way. You have many things either supported by the local government or
Or
sponsored in
corporate,
different ways.
actually, corporate scouting for startups. And they may even
Yes.
then become your MVP partner or your pilot. They may be even doing paid pilots, which
Mm-hmm.
is a great way for both sides to explore how to collaborate
Yes.
with each other. So that's, I think, and I advise the startups that I coach that they should look for these kind of connections. So I'm working with an introtech startup, and they had the opportunity to join an introtech focused accelerator. Come on. So they had great discussions during the selection process. So it was like a no brainer that this would lead to something really tangible and that they should do it.
I completely agree. Yes, that is definitely a good way. And I see more and more corporates trying to reach out to startups in some ways. It's still obscure, I think, for founders to know how to approach that, because you never want to be too early in the discussion where you don't have yet something to defend. But in the same time, those corporates want to start talking to you early because, well, process takes time for them. So I think it's always difficult to find the right way to approach them. But yes, even if there are any programs or anything that can facilitate that, that is always a big thing. Do you have any other recommendation or tips or anything before we wrap up?
Um, No, not really. Maybe just one observation. Doing my own startup has really led to my whole life being much more intense. So I feel like the last couple of months have been like years before. It feels like everything is so much more condensed. It's so much more fun, but also when it's kind of stressful or when something is not working out, this is also more intense. So it's really it's a way to intensify your life. If you are ready for this, go for it. If you feel like you cannot have more emotional intensity, maybe then this would be even too much. So that's something that I've really kind of observed doing a startup. It's really something you cannot explain, or you have to go through. So
Yes.
that's
And
maybe
even when you're
the last
working with
point I wanted to share.
Definitely. And even when you're working with startups, you can't never really
Yeah.
be prepared. Like you
No,
worked in VCs, so you've been close to startups before, but being your own on your own, building your own thing, completely different.
and I can also see why a VC firm or the investors in a firm, should at least to some people or to a certain extent have their own founder experience, because it is really different. And when I talk to people who have founded something, we can have other discussions than if I talk to people who are great investment managers and great investors, but haven't gone through what we are going through. It's just it kind of different. And I
Yeah.
think for people on the other side, it's also good to have a mix. So I would even say diversity should be there when it comes to investors who have been founders and investors who haven't.
So true, and I think it's one of the reasons why the scene in the US is so different and so much stronger than in Europe. It's because most of the investors there have founders experience before,
Yeah.
while in Europe it's quite rare to find a founder that has switched side of the table. Some angels, many angels, used
Of
to be
course, a
founders,
lot.
but VCs, not there yet. So when they're on your board, you always prefer to have someone who have not just the numbers, but some also real life experience.
Yes, true.
Brilliant. Well, Penny, it has been such a pleasure to have you today. Lots of very interesting tips here and there, and I really loved your story. I really wish we can keep in touch really soon, and I want to follow your progress. Hopefully, I'll see you involved in lots of things with VC in the UK. Well, I'm more involved in the UK, so if I
Yes,
see
yes,
you
sure.
somewhere, it would be fantastic. And feel free to reach out anytime if I can be of any help with anything.
Of course. And I wish you all the best for your entrepreneurial journey. So I'd love to see how things go. So let me also know how you are progressing. Let's keep in touch. That's amazing.
Definitely. I will. Well, thanks a lot, Penny. I'm going to have a short break on the stream and I'll certainly come back just to say hi to a bunch of people here, especially the regular ones. But I'll also be back tomorrow for gaming stream, our usual weekly gaming stream, and in 2 weeks we'll have another guest. So we are restarting the live AMA, and we are keeping the format which is happening every 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks we'll have another guest, and this time we'll be talking more about design, from product design, startup design, and everything design for startups. Thanks everyone, and see you in a few minutes. And thanks, Penny. Enjoy the weekend.
You too. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.